Good evening, everyone, and welcome to Go Rural Virtually. I'd like to begin by acknowledging our country. Today, we stand in footsteps millennia old. May we acknowledge the traditional owners whose cultures and customs have nurtured and continue to nurture this land since men and women awoke from the great dream. We honour the presence of these ancestors who reside in the imagination of this land and whose irrepressible spirituality flows through all creation. I'd also like to acknowledge that I'm hosting this meeting from the lands of the Turrbal and Yuggera peoples. I also acknowledge the traditional custodians of the various lands on which we all meet tonight, and any First Nations peoples participating in this meeting. I pay my respects to elders past, present and emerging, and celebrate the diversity of First Nations peoples and their ongoing cultures and connections to the lands and waters of Australia. My name is Meredith, and on behalf of Health Workforce Queensland, I welcome the health students and speakers who have come together to be part of Go Rural Virtually, embracing rural placements. We selected rural placements because placements have the capacity to transform students professionally and personally, as well as create unexpected opportunities and lifelong memories. To explore what's involved in undertaking a rural placement, including the benefits, the challenges, and how best to prepare yourself, we've brought together an exciting group of speakers made up of placement coordinators, clinical educators, placement supervisors, and health students. So we're going to begin tonight's discussion with our two speakers who will broadly cover the topics of navigating the administrative elements of rural placements and the importance of practicing cultural safety. From there, we'll head into separate breakout rooms. There'll be a room for medicine, a room for nursing and midwifery students, and also a room for allied health, where you'll be able to have interactive discussions with our speakers relating to your disciplines. To finish, we'll meet as one group for feedback and to share some important resources with you. Because Go Rural Virtually is an interactive discussion between students and speakers, we encourage you to type the questions into the chat function throughout the all-in sessions. And that way the speakers can respond to you, or I will pause also throughout the discussion and we'll just maybe throw some questions out to the speakers. So please, we encourage you to use the chat function because Go Rural Virtually is for you, the students. So to start, I'd like to introduce Marie Nichols. Marie is a Senior Student Placement Coordinator with Murdapuna Centre for Rural and Remote Health in Mount Isa. Marie brings over 20 years of experience working in student administration and support. So I think that's a very good place to start, Marie. And I guess, I don't know whether this is a political question or not, so, but I think it's an important question. I know from Health Workforce Queensland, we have had a lot of experience with student placements through the John Flynn program when it was running, and through our Grow Rural program, we anecdotally, we hear often that placements for medical students are much more accessible than for non-medical students. And I'm just wondering if that's something that you could perhaps address as you introduce the subject of rural placements tonight, please.
Okay, throw me in the deep end. That's fine. Okay, hello everyone. Yes, my name's Marie. In answer to that question, Meredith, I would say that it's possibly historically seemed or been easier for medical students to gain placements, possibly because they started, the medical schools, I guess, started sending out, the university started sending out students en masse, I guess, earlier than, say, allied health, for example. So I think we're in a bit of a catch up there. At this point, I would say that my understanding is that there seems to be a bit of I'm trying to say the right words without upsetting anybody, but it seems a lot easier for medical students to gain subsidies and things like that for to assist with going rural for placements, a lot more so than nursing or allied health students. So hopefully we can do our best to change that. But I guess that leads into my first little bit of spiel, which is basically explaining what a UDRH is. So a UDRH is a University Department of Rural Health. It is federally funded, specifically to increase allied health placements in rural areas, rural and remote. So we take we're an interdisciplinary group, so we will take medical students and students from all disciplines as we can, and so we are heavily focused on that interdisciplinary thing. But our specification from the government is for allied health and nursing placements. So that particularly with Metapuni, that is where our focus lies. Having said that, a large number of our students are still coming through as medical students. However, our goal is to increase the allied health student placement. So I'm hoping that that will be the case in the future. And obviously, placements are always determined by the number of supervisors and staff that we have there willing to take students. So, but we are working on that, and that is part of our goal. So basically, we are there to increase the numbers of health professionals in rural and remote areas with a focus on Indigenous health as well by taking students for rural placement. Now, I know that all UDRHs, even though they're the same, they're all different. It's just the way things go. It's like universities are all the same, but they're different. So I can speak for Metapuni. We don't charge for student placements at all in our accommodation, so you are accommodated free of charge as a Commonwealth supported student. We don't charge you anything at all, and everything is there. The accommodation is completely self-contained, so you don't need to bring anything except yourself, your clothes, and some toiletries. And we do our best to look after you. So UDRHs facilitate placements. They provide learning and study facilities. We have sim labs and libraries and things like that. So everything's kind of there. But I guess one of the big focus that we have is to ensure that you enjoy your placement. We do our very best to make sure that you have good supervisors so you have a good clinical experience. But you can get a good clinical experience pretty much anywhere. So our special point is that we give you a great time. So we will get you involved in the community. We'll get you involved in going camping. We provide camping gear. We do all sorts of things to make sure that you actually feel a part of the community, learn what a great place it is being in a rural town. And hopefully the idea is that you'll want to come back again after you've had such a wonderful experience. So and I can say with all honesty, hand on heart, we do get a lot of students who come for rural placement and who then actually come back in employed positions. So what types of placements do we have? Well, we cover a range of areas. So there are hospital placements, private practice, whether that's GPs or physios or anything that you can think of. We've got them there. Primary health clinics, particularly in our outreach placements, go through schools, Indigenous health services. Pretty much you can get a placement anywhere where there is someone that is able to supervise you, and often you'll find in rural, particularly in remote areas, that you may be covering 2 different places. So you might spend some time as a medical student in a hospital and in the GP practice, or you might go to a primary health clinic as a nursing student, or even as a medical student. We try to have interdisciplinary sessions, so you might get to spend some time in a pharmacy, you might get to spend some time in a different area of interest. We will do whatever we can to facilitate the best learning experience that we can get for you. Sorry, my clock's just stopped on how long have I got? Okay, trying to keep to time here, people. Okay, so one of the things that people say is, oh, why would I want to go rural? You know, it'd be better if I'm in the city. Well, I'm sorry to disappoint you, but you're wrong. You're not. You're going to have the best time in a rural placement. You will have a greater range of patients. You'll see a larger diversity of illnesses or conditions, or whatever it is that your area calls them, and you will be much more hands-on. You get to have more responsibility. You often have one-on-one or very small groups with your supervisors, so you can get that really good feedback and training, and from our wonderful, wonderful supervisors and preceptors who are interested in helping you to learn as much as you possibly can while you're there. As I said, we have outreach opportunities, particularly I'm based in Mount Isa, currently in Longreach, so we cover most of northwestern Queensland, and we have some amazing outreach opportunities in places like Burketown, Corumba, Normanton, and Weipa. As I said, these are interdisciplinary placements and great learning opportunities. You'll be with a range of students, all from different disciplines. You live with them, you talk with them, you can socialise with them, you can discuss cases and different aspects of everything, so that you learn that the most important thing being in a rural area is that you are part of a team and everybody has to work together. Then community involvement, like I said, I can only speak towards about Murapuni, but we, in all of our different places, we have contacts with our tourist attractions, and we actually subsidise students to go and visit things like, well, here in Longreach, the Qantas Museum, and in Mount Isa we send you on a underground mine tour. There are lots of things that you can go and see, and you know, there are so many different things in community, and people are so happy to have you around and to meet you that they will take you places. I know a lot of students in Mount Isa last summer took up water skiing, and I think they call it tubing or something, with the big tire tube thing on the back of the boats, because one particular student was talking to a supervisor, and he was talking to somebody else who said, oh, we're having a day out at the lake. And so suddenly we had students going out there every weekend, being picked up by different people and taken out there to do all sorts of things. So that's you know, something that we try to do. You'll find that there are 1,000,001 volunteer opportunities that you can get involved with as well. Great things to put on resumes. The other thing at the moment particularly is that there is a lot of work opportunity. So if you're worried that you're going to have to give up your work for 4, 6, 8 weeks, whatever it is, while you're on placement, there are always opportunities, and we're more than happy to help you source somewhere for you to do a bit of part-time work. I mean, whether that's in the local cafe or the local RSL club, or, you know, it doesn't matter. We will find something for you. Pharmacies are often looking for people to assist, even if it's just for a short time. So that's another option. Another one that we need to talk about is the realities of being of going on a rural placement. I know it can seem really daunting. A lot of people haven't been a long way from home before. They're not maybe not feeling confident about driving a long way to a placement, or flying somewhere and then not having a vehicle and things like that. So again, as I said, I can only speak for us, but all of our student accommodation is close to the hospitals, within walking distance. In Mount Isa, you can walk anywhere in town from any of our accommodation facilities. People are happy to pick you up from airports to take you to different things. It's, you know, one of those amazing things about community is that there's always somebody around who's willing to help you out with something. But just a few things, you know, driving long distances, make sure you've got water, make sure your car's been serviced. Fuel up whenever you feel the need to, because you know, sometimes you might not realize just how far it is to the next place where you can get fuel. Don't drive at night time. Don't drive in early morning or late evening, because you'll find that there's lots of critters around, some small, some very large, and they can do a bit of damage. So just be careful of that. Wherever you're going, I would suggest, particularly if you're coming out west or north, buy yourself a cheap prepaid Telstra SIM. Even the phones that they say run on a Telstra line will not work in some places. You have to actually have a Telstra phone. So please make sure that you get a little SIM before you go, and put a few dollars on it so that you always can contact somebody, particularly if you're driving, because there are long gaps between towns, and you might find that you're out of service, and you know, you've got a flat tire or something. You need to have that. Another thing that you will find in rural areas, the more remote you go, particularly groceries are much more expensive. There's usually a smaller variety, and it may be difficult to cater for some kind of special dietary requirements. So if you're celiac, for example, or if you're vegan or whatever, then you may need to bring some staples with you so that you have them on hand. That's not to say that you can't get pretty much everything you want everywhere you go. Just the really very remote places where you'll find that there is a very small, limited selection often. But again, that's part of the experience of going remote, and you learn to see how everybody lives in these very tiny communities. So basically, just to kind of round up what I've been talking about, the amazing thing about going rural is that you get a really rounded experience. You're not shoved in the back of a room somewhere with 10 other students, just kind of trying to see over the top of everybody to see what's happening, and not really getting much information or interaction from your supervisors. Out here, you're right up front. Everyone's talking to you. You can have an amazing experience. It's a very diverse learning, everything, diseases that you may not see in the cities, to chronic disease, to following patients through. I've had students who've been out in Burketown on a placement, managed to get involved with an RFDS service that went out there to pick up a patient, and when they came back to Mount Isa the next week, they were able to go and see that lady and just make sure that she was okay, because that's where she'd been taken for surgery. So you get to know people, you get to feel a part of the community. Everybody's friendly, and the really big thing to keep in mind is that all the UDRHs provide support for students. I am on call 24/7 for students in northwest Queensland at the moment. you know, if you lock yourself out of your room, if you're feeling isolated or upset, there is always someone to speak to, someone who will do their best to make sure that you're okay, and anything that we can do to make everything go as smoothly for you as possible.
Thanks, Marie. That's great. I think there's been a couple of comments in regard to the SIM card. So I'll just read out what's being said. So Jess has said, sorry.
Yep.
Jess has said, I've only been as far west as Theodore, but an LD SIM worked pretty well in that region, just FYI. And somebody's asked, can you clarify what an LD SIM is for everyone in the room that may not know? And then David has insightfully written, yeah, but it's the gap along the road between the towns that is the issue with Telstra only having service. Optus and similar subcontractors like LD only work with a few Ks of the, within a few Ks of the centre of the towns. The other, sorry, David, did you want to say something? Or was, oh no. The other issue is if you are doing a long drive, you must have a travel plan and someone notified of expected arrival times at checkpoints. So someone is aware if you have not arrived and comes looking for you. That's, I think, a really important point. And I think that speaks to what you raised, Marie, about being part of a team, and we always look out for one another and we make sure that people know where we are. And you know, when people aren't where we think they are, we take, you know, we make sure that we can find them. And Kerry's written, living 500 Ks west of Townsville and 400 Ks east of Mount Isa, the only telecommunications that worked was Telstra.
Yep.
So, yeah, I think Telstra's won the vote here, guys.
We've got a question from Deanna.
Yes, I'm just going to jump to that. Thanks, Ev. Deanna's asked, is it possible to split placements between rural and home location?
Do you want me to answer that?
Yeah, anybody can answer that.
Okay.
Yeah.
That would be completely up to the universities to decide how that would work. I would suggest it would have to be quite a long placement if you wanted to split that, depending on where you were and where you wanted to go. But generally speaking, I think placements, particularly coming out to Northwest Queensland, they are the whole placement is completed there. The other thing to keep in mind is that we do have minimum numbers of weeks that we can host students for as part of our contracts with the Department of Health. So yeah, but basically any kind of splitting of placements or whatever all have to go by the rules of the university that you're attending.
I might be able to help with that one. So with my final year nursing placements this year, I communicated to the uni that I lived out in Dalby and that if they were happy to put me on a placement out here, that I wouldn't need any accommodation provided. So I think if you just communicate with the uni to let them know why you would maybe want to go to a certain location and if it might be more practical to you, that it would definitely be possible to sort something like that out.
Thanks.
I'll just add in too, Meredith, if that's okay. Just from It's Sherilyn here, the clinical placement coordinator for Southwest Queensland. It is really, that's a good point, Kate, that definitely communication is the key. I come across a lot of local students and have done over the last 4 years where they are struggling with a university because they're not getting placements in Southwest Queensland, and that's where they ultimately want to do their graduate year. And it's a matter of, the question I always ask is, have you told them that you want to do your graduate year in the Southwest and that is where you want to go? And the big key is communication. Students definitely need to have that communication there. If they ever struggle, reach out to the Director of Nursing to the facility, for example, for nursing students, or reach out to the facility or go above, talk to your lecturers at the universities and they can help as well. Even like Marie and myself, if we get a phone call from a local student that desperately wants a placement in Central West, Northwest or Southwest, we are going to help them. We're not going to tell you to call your university if you've already tried it 20 times. We're going to ask you if you've called your university, and if you have and you're having no luck, we will reach out to the universities and help support you to get that placement.
Thanks, Sherilyn. Another question, do all the same considerations apply, e.g. subsidised housing for international students? Who would like to pick that up?
I've just sent a response through to that. UDRHs and rural clinical schools are funded for Commonwealth supported place students, so not for international students. There is some discretionary ability, however, it's very limited, shall we say. We are audited very regularly, and unfortunately the government doesn't really take kindly to us breaking their rules. So so you can ask, but I will be honest and say that yeah, it's not something that we're funded for, and so we have to respond to questions from the government when they ask. The auditors can be not the nicest people when they think that we're wasting their money.
Thanks, Marie. And then somebody has asked, what's the minimum length of a rural placement? And I think David's answered on your behalf, Marie, to say JCU year 6 students usually do 10-week placements in Longreach elsewhere, and some students do 2 terms in Longreach, not sequentially, e.g. term 2 and term 4, and some do the whole year in Longreach. Just wondering if any of the other speakers would like to talk about what their minimum rural placements are.
So it depends on the discipline as well, Meredith, as to what the placement length of time is. Obviously, for nursing, it's going to vary, and it varies also from education provider to education provider. So I think it's one of those things we're working towards extended placements quite heavily in the Southwest, and that's a minimum of 8-week placements. And that is due to the fact that we want people to stay in the communities for a longer period of time, so they get a better exposure, more opportunity to embed themselves in the community, and also possibilities there to gain part-time employment or casual employment while they're living here. So, and also the longer the length of the stay, the more they're usually eligible for as to bursaries and so forth, and free accommodation.
And my answer was actually for the person who wanted to know, is it possible to split placements between rural and home location? Okay. So you don't have to actually do it all at once. That was, so it wasn't so much the length of placement, it was just the fact that you can split them.
Great,
or
thanks.
Not at all.
Thanks, David, appreciate that clarification.
Just Dr. Tiffany here, one of the supervisors as well in Longreach. Central West is very well represented today.
We want you to be greedy.
Yeah, yes. I just wanted to add, in terms of that minimal length of placement, is that, like, at the end of the day, we want you guys to come and spend as much time as you can in our community. Like, we're passionate about these places and we want you guys to come and enjoy yourselves. But at the end of the day, we have a huge variety, ranging from sort of 2 weeks to, as we've said, some students do an entire year, depending on discipline and depending on university that they're studying in. But I can say that anecdotally, nearly every single group of students I've worked with this year has said they wish they stayed longer. And so one of the things is if just coming for 2 weeks is enough to get your toes wet so that you realise that it's something that you enjoy, then just slowly increase how long you're here, because I think you will find that you enjoy it a lot more than you expect.
Thanks, Tiffany. Anybody else want to add any comments or ask a question?
Just a quick thing, sorry to keep interrupting. I guess one of the other things to remember is too, because obviously David and Tiffany are representing Central West Hospital and Health Service, whereas, for example, Marie and myself are representing our UDRHs respectively, which is Southern Queensland Rural Health and Murder-Puri. So it's, I guess, understanding our different roles in the placement as well. So whilst Tiffany has said they're quite happy to take 1 or 2 week placements, which are your observational placements for medical and things like that as well, whilst the UDRHs are encouraging for longer term placements, it's not that we won't take or won't support and work towards the shorter placements. We just want people to come back out here and stay, because research has found that the longer they are, as Tiffany said, students generally say, we wish our placement was longer. So just so the clarification there with between the HHS and the UDRHs as well. We have different goals we need to report on, basically.
I think it probably also speaks to, you have to navigate that sort of thin line between, students who perhaps have no rural experience and just want to go 2 weeks, just let me do 2 weeks, just as just to get an idea. They don't want to necessarily commit to a long placement, but once they've done that 2 weeks, they're obviously happy to do a longer placement. But I think it's good to have the provision of that kind of a range of placement weeks. And I think that's perhaps where Health Workforce Queensland has assisted in their rural immersion program. So whilst they're not placements, they allow students to experience what it's like to live and work in rural communities, and then that encourages them to take up rural placements. So I think there's there's obviously arguments about long-term and short-term placements, but I think there's a very valid role for both approaches. Now, we had hoped to hear from Lee. She's a clinical educator with Southern Queensland Rural Health, but I think she's unable to join us tonight. And she was going to speak to us about cultural safety, but I just really want to take this opportunity because it's such an important area of placement, and because we know that the majority of students are really interested in Indigenous health, learning more about Indigenous health and participating in Indigenous health. So I just want to open up the floor to anybody who perhaps identifies as Aboriginal and or Torres Strait Islander, or people who have had experience of working in a community controlled health service, just maybe to talk a bit to students who where this would be an area of interest, but they're not quite sure, like, is it okay for me as a white person to go to an Aboriginal medical service on placement? Will I be accepted? What are the protocols? And I'm just wondering, is there anybody in the group that would like to kick that discussion off for the next 5 minutes?
So Christiane, who's sitting right next to me, I'm going to throw her under the bus. So Christiane is currently in a conjoint position with Southern Queensland Rural Health and SWATSITch, Charleville Western area,
Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander. Then it gets a bit blurry.
Corporation, I think it is. So I'm throwing her under the bus. She might be a good candidate, obviously, to talk about the experience within the Aboriginal and Torres Strait Health.
And just to add to that, I've also spent a lot of time up in Mount Isa. Even starting as a graduate, I worked up on Mornington Island. So some of the things that I've picked up throughout my career, working within the culturally safe practice of just getting back to your basics. So introducing yourself, who you are, what's your role, and then asking some questions, asking what their preferred name is, asking where they're from, are they local, or where they've come from and where their family is. So, and just taking into consideration, especially my background's in emergency nursing, we're seeing people at very vulnerable times, and just asking them whether they need a support person in with them, or sometimes with Indigenous families, they might need 4 or 5 people because that's their family, that's who they need to support them at that time. So just taking into consideration that it might be a little bit different to your family. Who I call mum and who I call father is a lot different to an Indigenous family, where they might have multiple people that take on that role of mother as well in their family. So they might need a couple more people in hospital with them, visiting and offering that support. In my role at SWATSITch, I'm coming in as an educator, so I do 2 different roles there. I'm helping run a child health program. which has been very exciting. We're looking at the ages 0 to 5, getting some programs up and running. And it's a completely different approach that I've taken in this program compared to my acute hospital experience, where we're even inviting them to come in, have a cuppa and just come and talk to us, find out who we are, where we fit in and what we're doing and what we want to achieve together. So it's definitely coming in and getting that experience that you've gained from university or in different other jobs that you've come in, taking that life experience and just working together. We've all got a common goal. So just finding out how each role can work together and what we're going to do to help improve health services. So we come in, we're taking them down to the pool one day and they get to splash around in the kids pool, but that's all just introducing them to the health service, trying to get them in so that we can complete health assessments later on with someone that they know, someone that they've already talked to, who sat down and had a cup of tea with them. So it is completely different. And just being mindful that there will be some differences when you go out and practice. But just again, acknowledge that we don't know everything and just ask questions. They're really open. They love to share their stories and different cultural traditions and different things. So just taking that time to ask the questions, or if there's a social activity on, like we just had some of the students out and they did a painting session, but we also got to learn some of the symbolism in Aboriginal art and different things. So you can find common ground to talk to and different interests that you can, start a conversation with.
Vid, I think you had a question.
No, just to add to what Christy said, from a student perspective, I've done some rural placements or in Indigenous communities, been to Tennant Creek, been to Broome, Palm Island, Dimagee. And just to add to what Christy said, go in with, leave your preconceived ideas behind and, be open-minded. I think that's really important. And then you got to be aware of your own biases, which, it came to me, I'm like, I'm not racist, but you go there and sometimes the things you say, the way you interact, there are some preconceived or some biases or stereotypes that that kind of like affect the way you deliver your care or the way you interact with them. So kind of being aware of that and being open-minded and asking those questions, again, as Krista said. So when I was in Tennant Creek, ask for like a cultural safety session or cultural orientation, and then stay in touch with that person. So if any time you have a question, reach out to them, send them a message. And for me, I have a really good example. I did that with my the lady who delivered the session, and and one weekend she invited me to join her family to go out to the lake, and we had kangaroo tail and a cup Mary style under the ground, and it was incredible. And just spending the day with them, learning from them, learning and understanding, and showing that you're willing to learn and ask questions. They will have, the community are really welcoming. You've got to just give them that opportunity and be open-minded to it.
Thanks, Vid. Yeah, I think that's a great summary, and certainly amazing opportunities come when we get to interact with Indigenous communities.
Meredith, if I might add something
Sure.
as well.
Yes,
Jo Caldwell, I'm the senior mental health clinician in Yarrabah in Girrini Yilamaka Aboriginal Health Corporation. And so Yarrabah is about an hour southeast of Cairns, up in the North Queensland, and it's the Indigenous community up there. And I received my permanent position through doing a student placement out there. And so it is absolutely welcoming to people that are non-Indigenous, and now being a permanent member of the health staff. There are not many of us that are non-Indigenous in my team, which is excellent. There's a few, just maybe one or two, and then the rest is local people from the community. And I have to say, absolutely welcoming. However, it is important that you go in with the right attitude. Be open to hear their stories, as we've already been told. Be open to having discussions about the ways. And some of the really interesting things that happen, which I've never seen happen in practice before, is that it's a very connected community. So if someone doesn't attend an appointment, we jump in the car, we go around the house, we yell out the window, hey, where's such and such? We beat the horn. They go, oh, they're over at such and such's. So we drive around their house, we find them, and they come out and they say, yeah, sorry, I missed it. We had something going on. Can I book in again tomorrow? So you wouldn't find that in, I haven't found it in any of the other health places I've worked in. So it is quite a connected place to work in, and it is really wonderful because you, over the time that you do your placement, you do get to know the families and become really quite connected with them too. So yeah, I would highly recommend an Indigenous placement within a health service.
Thanks, Jo. Jo, do you feel qualified just to give the students a bit of an overview as to why Indigenous peoples are so reticent to go into hospitals and, you know, I guess white institutions?
Absolutely. So it is very, it's very much steeped back into the history, the intergenerational trauma that you see, and you do see it. And I know you learn about it in all the studies, but then you go there and you see the fears that have carried on through the generations of what happens. Even the other day, I had someone who said, no, I'm not going in there. My uncle went in there and he ended up never coming back. So it's that stories that have come through, and they're real stories. They're not just fabricated stories. Their experiences of trauma have been so great. They've been passed down, and that fear still lives within families and even young people today. That systemic racism that they have faced through, especially I find in Yarrabah, because it is a mission community. So the stolen generation was brought there to be placed. So we have traditional owners, but we also have generations of families that have lived there and have been placed there through the Aborigines Act and the stolen generation of the day. So there is that historic context that we are trying to work through by going out into community as much as possible, listening to the people as much as possible about what works for them. A lot of my sessions, my counselling sessions and therapy sessions are held on the beach because people don't feel comfortable coming in. We hold events to get people to come into the service, and they come in groups, which is, you know, we do the health checks, young people health checks, and they all coming together, and there's incentives, and there's it's, you know, to get people in. But yeah, there is that historical context. Is that, I hope that's what you're asking.
Yes, thanks, Jo. That's perfect. I think, and you know, what you touched on there is also important. The flexibility in where you practice your profession, and the language that you use is so important. So thank you for that, and thanks for everyone's contributions. It's time for us to go into the breakout rooms. So what we'll do next, everyone, is there are 3 breakout rooms. There's one for medical students, one for nursing, midwifery, and a 3rd room for allied health. So room 1, medical, room 2, nursing midwifery, and room 3 is allied health. So once you select your breakout room, you'll meet other like, you know, students with the same discipline, but also speakers who have experience of placements or of being supervisors, and of course students who have already done placements. So we're going to have a 35-minute discussion, and then we're all going to come back together, you know, and a reminder that, you know, Health Workforce Queensland is here to support everyone in whatever way we can. You've met the Future Workforce team tonight, myself and Evelyn and Wendy. But we also have an additional resource which we call Going Rural, and I have mentioned it quickly earlier tonight. But Going Rural is was started really in response to, as I started the conversation tonight with Marie, we noted from students that non-medical students really struggled to firstly go on placement, secondly to go on a rural placement, and to have any support in terms of accommodation and transport costs. So we established Going Rural, and this is open to students going on placement at primary healthcare settings, and it pays up to $1,000 per placement, and that's to help cover those costs that, you know, because we know that you're disadvantaged when you go on placement in terms of not being able to maintain your employment and of often having to pay additional rent. So that's just a way we have of helping you out, and we encourage you to visit the Health Workforce Queensland website. There's a specific page there for students, and you'll find all of our programs there, as well as what we call the Students Resource Hub. And there on that page, we have links to, for those of you that want to learn more about placements, there are links there to guides, to some of the videos of students who have been on placement, scholarships and bursaries, and also organisations that, excuse me, people are coming home next door, so you'll probably hear noisy, excited voices. So in addition, there's also a organisations or locations who are happy to take students on as placements, and we'll be happy to add to that list of any of the speakers or organisations tonight would like to be part of that. We're very happy to add you. So I'm mindful that we've run out of time, and I'm sorry that we didn't get to all of the questions, all of the discussion points. It's such an important area, but I do want to thank firstly all the speakers who came on board tonight. They volunteered their time to be here. Obviously, you know, they all have very busy workloads, but they've given their time generously to speak with you. And we value their expertise and their knowledge. And as we do the students, all of you who came on board tonight and participated, and have a good night, and we will be back in 2023 with a whole new series of Go Rural Virtually, so stand by. Thanks everyone, and good night.
Hello, I'm Fiona.
I'm Jordan.
We're on our way driving back from Yeppoon to Brisbane. We just finished our 2 weeks observership in Yeppoon. We thought we might just go through what happened there, and hopefully it can help you on your observership.
Cool.
So the first question is, what do you think were the highlights of this observership?
Okay, so, well, Yeppoon has a small hospital. It's got a ward with a bunch of beds and a decent emergency department, and has a lot of things that a big hospital would have, but just smaller. So that was pretty cool, and we got to see a lot of the hospital. Highlights were towards the second half of the observership, when I was handling my own patients, taking histories, and that was a big deal. So I felt like, oh, I'm doing doctoring things, which was amazing.
Yeah, I think definitely. Well, like one of the advantage of going under trees, which is like primarily rural-based small hospitals, is that you get to do a lot. We got to see our own patients, and a lot of the patients in small town are very nice as well.
Yeah, and
some
they're very
of them,
happy to have students.
They're very happy to have students practice on them. And I had a patient said to me, "Oh, just practice on me, like you have to start somewhere. And I just thought most people are very kind.
Yeah, I guess that's brings us to like procedural skills that we got to practice while we were at the hospital. So that was cannulas, blood draws, injections. Fiona did some suturing.
Yeah, luckily.
Indwelling catheter, wound management.
So yeah, we had a long list of things we get to do.
You know, picking up drips, administering medications. Yeah.
One of the helpful thing that we did in the beginning of observership is the medical director of the hospital encouraged us to write a wish list of everything that we want to do. When you have a list, and then you can know what to ask for. So I guess just be used to be used to introducing yourself, like, hi, I'm Fiona, I'm a first-year medical student here for observership for 2 weeks. I would love to do suturing. Is there an opportunity where you can supervise me to do this? So be prepared for that.
Yeah.
That's useful.
Yeah, definitely ask people. You know, there's some people who take you under their wing and want to show you everything, and other people you may just need to let them know who you are and what you'd like to achieve. So definitely would recommend writing a list. You can hand that out to people, leave it on shift coordinator's desk.
That was helpful.
Yeah, all around the hospital. Ours got photocopied and stuck up everywhere. But if someone doesn't do that for you, perhaps you could do that yourself. Yeah. Okay.
Okay. Next question. What are some useful things to review from what we learned in first year before we head on that observation?
Yeah. So to prepare, I would say history taking and some of the physical examinations for me would have been. I feel like I would have benefited from practicing those a little more, only because I did a lot of that on this placement, so which was fine, learning on the job. But yeah, you'll hopefully get to do a lot of that yourself. So if you practice that'll set you up.
I definitely agree with that. We did a lot of history taking. I mean, maybe reviewing a whole year of material is too much, but if you can just focus on a few common presentations like chest pain, cold, fractures, I think just knowing those few common histories would be useful. And maybe ECG as well, because we see a lot of that in emergency departments.
Yeah, ECGs, basics of sort of reading a chest X-ray, that sort of thing. We had a great time though. You see, we have bikes in the back, so we tried to get around and see Yeppoon, which is a fantastic town, great beaches, nice places to go out. So I think that's a bit of a highlight too, is having a little holiday built in. So try to see whatever's around us, the locals. What do you do? What's some places I should, take the opportunity to see while I'm here? Have fun on your trees if you end up going.
Yeah, make the most out of it.
I definitely recommend.
I'm David Rimmer. I just talk a lot. I'm the Director of Clinical Training for Central West. I've been on a bit of sick leave recently, but that's all good fun. Learning the other side of the ropes. I think the biggest issue is that for the majority of people, what you hear about rural in the cities is from people who have no idea. And so the idea of, so that's one thing. Second thing is that while there's a great emphasis on rural origin students, in fact, currently still the majority of doctors in rural Australia are city people who have converted. Who wants to spend an hour in traffic to, both ways, getting to uni, going home again from uni, as opposed to, a 5-minute walk, and for the other 55 minutes, you can just look at a beautiful sunrise and a sunset. And we have little community groups that do lots of things for students, and there's lots of opportunities. And it's the life that makes the difference.
Hi everyone, I'm Jess. I'm a third year medical student at the University of Queensland, and I'm also the outgoing TROPIC president, which is one of the rural health clubs in Queensland. And I've done a few rural placements or, regional rural placements at this point through, different programs through UQ and then through the past John Flynn program as well. I'm also currently at Hervey Bay at the moment for my third year and going to Toowoomba next year for fourth year. But that's pretty much me.
My turn. I guess I'm an example of what Dr. David Rimmer alluded to. I grew up in the city. I grew up in Sydney, and my reasons are I hated the traffic. I didn't want to pay for parking, and I wanted to see stars at night. Evelyn, are we going to throw the slide in now, or if you can?
Yes, I can. Hang on a moment.
Yeah, so maybe
let
just
me
got a slide just of some photos of some of the placements. And again, from everything that Marie mentioned in Mount Isa, because I went out to Mount Isa, that camel there right in the middle, that was a photo I taken in Mount Isa. And it really, some of these placements, when you come out from the city and you go to the bush, you really never want to go back into the city ever again. It's the community aspect, the experiences that you get and the adventures that you get to have along the way really helps you kind of form a bond to these rural towns. Yes, it can be challenging. I'm not going to stay here, say that it's always been rainbows and unicorns. There are some challenges, but it's just all about giving it a go, being proactive about reaching out. So I'm not sure if you can see the first photo on the top left, that was in Broome. So I was part of that John Flynn placement program. So I met Evelyn and the whole team through there, and that was an incredible experience. So right under there, I can't remember where that is, but when you're on rural placements, you get to, deal with RFDS some of the time, almost every night, sometimes at some places. So getting to see that retrieval medicine, if that's an interest of yours, you get to kind of see that being on rural placements. Going further down to seeing all that fruits and vegetables, that was dropped in to us by patients, all the community members for the medical students who come to Collinsville. So Collinsville's a small rural town, I think 1,000 population west of Mackay region, and they love having students over. And the thing is that you got to be proactive, and this is a tip that to any of the students I give, here at JCU, but sometimes you can feel isolated. So what I do, which again, I encourage a lot of people to do, is find the community's Facebook group. Sorry, Evelyn. Oh, yeah. So find the community's Facebook group. There's always like a buy, swap and sell or a community board, and be like, hey guys, I'm a medical student. I'm coming to your community for 5 weeks, 10 weeks, whichever period. I'd love to get involved. Let me know. And just by doing that, people would send you messages being like, they come to the hospital, let you know that, hey, there's an event happening. So the more you throw yourself into wanting to join and immerse within your community, the more opportunities you get. And talking about the stars, that was just in Barcaldine. I'm in Emerald at the moment, so I drove out to Barcaldine for a camp with my friend. And so the stars are incredible. Up top is time in Thursday Island at the start of this year, and including that sunset. Again, rural placements doesn't have to be about clinical stuff. You do see a lot of clinical stuff as well, but you can find a lot of opportunity. And down there is Dumaji, and I met some incredible kids there, and then the Indigenous community there, really welcoming. The more as I said, and we discussed earlier, being open and wanting to learn, they're very much happy to help you. So I probably didn't mention, so I'm a final year medical student from James Cook University. On my last placement in Emerald at the moment, and I will be joining Marie up in Mount Isa next year to commence my internship. So
that's exciting. But can I ask, so with your very first placement, what were your expectations before you went on placement?
Yeah, I guess before I went on placement, I didn't know what to expect. I think my first rural placement was Collinsville, and a lot of people, everyone's like, "Oh gosh, I'm so sad that you got bumped. You got shafted to Collinsville. It wasn't your preference. There's nothing going on. You're gonna be bored." And I think it's just, I guess there's a personality aspect to it. just listen to people who've been there before, identify, get a picture of what you're kind of getting yourself into, but then going with an open mind and being willing to kind of like, diss the stereotypes. And then I asked them, when I was in Collinsville, have an amazing place. There's a single doctor town, and you kind of see the amazing community aspect and the amazing medicine that you get to see, but then also you see some of the challenges. So some of the challenges being a rural doctor is you see that, they sometimes are the only doctor on call 24/7, to the point that some don't even have time to eat lunch. And, when I was in Collinsville, seeing the doctor who, as a poor uni student, it probably makes sense, but as a doctor who makes a bit of decent salary, he was eating 2-minute cup noodles for lunch because that's all he had time for. And kind of so seeing that, and then seeing that, how the nurses support him being there because they want the doctor to be there. So I guess like before going in, I was, I think I had hesitations thing like, oh, I'm going to be super isolated. I'm going to be bored, have nothing to do. And that was completely debunked when you go there and you make the effort. And there is a bit of ownership. If you go to a community, I have some friends and mates from uni who go to placement, to rural placements, because at JC it's compulsory. You go there, but then they're not open-minded to it. And they'd be like, oh God, I'm here, I'm stuck here. And once you have that attitude, it really impacts on how you get involved with the community and how the patients or the community see you. And sometimes when you go to a rural community where there's these students come and go, which happened to me at a different community I won't mention the name of, where you're treated like a revolving door. And that's because of an example set by the previous students. And it is unfortunate, but it's, I guess, up to us to kind of like make them think that that's not true. You give me a good experience, and I'd think of coming back.
Yeah.
And that's what's happening. I'm in Emerald right now and I'm loving it, and I could see myself coming back here.
That's amazing. What about you, Jess? Did you experience the same, or did you have, was your experience a bit different with your first placement?
I think my experience has been pretty similar to Vid's, really. I agree with Vid in terms of, having a really open mind and it being a big personality thing. I think that's a huge aspect about medical placements. And I really, I agree that some people, they get these placements and it's like the world has ended. And, if you have that sort of outlook, you're never going to enjoy it. But, I've just had a ball. Like similar to what David Rimmer was saying, I also city girl, grew up in Brisbane, went to UQ for undergrad and med, and I'd always really enjoyed being out in the, rural areas and the countryside, but I never really had the opportunity to, work out there or anything like that. And then each, opportunity that I've had to do, I haven't really done much any of my placement in Brisbane other than in phase 1. I've just loved it. Each placement, each region, each town that you're going to is so unique. And I think one of the real beauties about doing a regional, rural or remote placement is that you get to appreciate and learn about the things that really set towns apart. And that's something that, in metropolitan, you just don't really get to appreciate. You can't really appreciate what sets the Royal apart from the PA, in my opinion. And I think that's just the beauty of these areas. And it is so correct in saying that if you embrace the placement and if you embrace the town, they will embrace you. I have experienced this in all of my placements, but I think the one that really stands out would certainly be in Theodore. I was there for 12 weeks and we were so a part of the community. We were in the local tennis competition. The locals would take us up the creek or the river in their boat, just for the day. I'd walk along the street to, the main street to get some lunch, and the kids at the school would wave to me because they see me at tennis, and at the GP. So I think if you're willing to embrace a placement, it's just amazing how the community will take you on and, treat you as really that you've always been there. And I think Vid's also really hit the mark in saying that some communities, I think, do have a bit of a bad experience with medical students in that, the med student stays in their room, all day other than when they're at placement. They don't really get involved at all. They might see them at the IGA. And then, you know, they've got one doctor who's overworked, and I can understand how that would be really hard to then embrace, you know, students who are just coming for a short time and then leaving, never to be seen again. But I think, like, it's our responsibility to change the way that those placements are experienced for a community. It's so important for us to do. So yeah, I'm hooked, I think. And it's been really interesting in my role of Tropic, because obviously a lot of the emphasis at the moment is on, you know, with the new regional medical pathway, in keeping students who are, you know, from the regions, keeping them there and hoping that they choose to work there. But I really think that there's such importance in, you know, getting students out who've never had the opportunity. And like, you know, a lot of them really fall in love with it. I think it's new, it's different, and I don't think we can underestimate the importance of, you know, city folk getting out into the regions and rural communities and just absolutely loving it, like me and like Vid.
So when do you think you actually had made the decision, I'm going to go out rural? Was it before? Did you have those thoughts before you went on placement, or was it during your placement that you thought, I love this, I'm going back out here? Or, you know?
I think probably a bit of both. I'd always really enjoyed being in probably regional, rural areas, in terms of, you know, like just spending my time out there. I like the open air, but I think each placement really kind of just started to, I guess, water the seed that was already, you know, planted, I guess. And each experience has just been better and better. Well, the first one was great, and it's just, you know, gotten even better from there. So I can't even imagine really working in a metropolitan centre anymore. Yeah, but I don't really think there was like a super, you know, inciting moment where I, you know, was just decided, but it's just throughout, you know, the last 4 or 5 years, it's just been a process of, you know, realizing really that there's nowhere else I want to work than, you know, out here.
When you do come out, like I guess I encourage a lot of the any medical student or allied health students, like, take that step and do a rural placement, because once you do and you see these rural doctors who, you know, are amazing, they're such amazing mentors, and they have the time to, like, you know, on the afternoons to immerse yourself within the clinical environment as well, and teach you on a one-to-one basis, as opposed to if I were to stay even in Townsville, where you're one of so many other the students, just being in a smaller learning environment, you see a breadth of different conditions. From, you know, in the morning you'll have a fractured toe because a cow kicked my thing, like, you know, the thing, to, like, you know, and then maybe if your child's a birthing facility, then you can, you know, be assisting with birds as well, which and then you'll suture people up and get, like, hands-on practical skills. And then, like, when you do those kind of placements, you go back to, even for me, Townsville, my hometown, which is still regional, and I'm like, oh, like, I want to, like, I'm not learning anything here. Like, I'm actually learning so much more being in a smaller town.
I might throw to our supervisors, and I'm going to include you, David, as well, because I know you've had lots of students on placements, but what are your expectations, you know, of the students during placements?
Can I say something? Justin? Yep.
Yes.
So from my perspective, the best thing for a student to do would be to come have a few days, see what the place is like, but then plan your own learning. And as things come up along the way, you might get invited to the sheep sheds. And I know David Rimmer there, he's been organising students to go out to experience life on properties and things along the way. You know, if you come to me and say, such and such has invited me to go and look at the shearing sheds, I'm going to say, knock yourself out, go and have a look, because it's not just about experiencing the shearing sheds, but seeing the conditions that people might work in, why they get the injuries they get, experiencing the heat that they have to work in every day, and then realizing when they come in and they're incredibly dehydrated and they're, you know, completely done, then you know why. We get that in, you know, that the idea of how hard some people actually do work out here in the country. And so I'm very much for you to plan your own learning and plan your own cultural experiences, depending on who you come across, and you will get invited to any number of places, and I still do today. You know, just last week, someone invited me out to their property, actually twice last week. I declined because I've been to many properties, but you know, for yourselves, it would be a good experience, and I won't stand in the way of that if that's something that you approach me with, for example, as a supervisor. And I would probably predict 80% of supervisors would do about the same. So plan your own learning or experiences, and seek our support or you know, supervision for whatever you plan. You'll get more out of planning something for yourself than if I do something for you, if that makes any sense. David, you could probably back that up.
Absolutely. I think the thing that people need to bring out is curiosity. I mean, genuine, open curiosity.
Exactly.
And a sense that they can actually play with parts of their personality that they haven't used before. So, you know, if you're naturally a bit shy, you can be a bit more open, a bit more gregarious, you know, sort of join a few more things, because, you know, you might only be there for a short time, but you might learn so much about yourself in terms of what you do and how you do it. I just think the taking hold of the opportunity is really important. But the second thing is talk. So, you know, if you talk to people, you know, even it's one of the reasons why one of the things we're trying to work with, and it's a real problem in a lot of our facilities, is parallel consulting, where the student consults and then, you know, does a student type history, and then, you know, the doctor comes in and sits beside and actually does a consult. And a lot of our places don't have enough rooms to do that. But what that does is it gives you an opportunity to practice talking to people. And so I think curiosity, a willingness to have conversations, and a willingness to put yourself out there, because, you know, even if you do, there was a famous example video I was thinking about in terms of people from Sydney, a guy who came out from the University of Western Sydney, who said, you know, how do you guys, we were doing a bike ride, and I was saying, you know, we had to check which way the wind blows, because you go out into the wind and come back with the wind, so you don't get exhausted. And he said, how do you tell which way? So he said, how do you tell which way is the wind blowing? And he pulled out his iPhone and he started sort of checking things. And so I just went, anyway, that became something that he took in good grace, and it actually got him a whole range of conversations and interactions and stuff. And I think he ended up in rural New South Wales, but, you know, somebody's got to go to New South Wales. They can't all come to the best places.
Tiffany, would you like to add?
It's very hard. I think David and Justin have already said a lot of it, but
yes.
One of the things that I sort of try and sit down and talk to the students when they come is be enthusiastic learners, because I'm not going to lie, we as rural doctors are busy. All doctors are busy. I personally think we as rural doctors are more busy because, you know, I'm a rural doctor. But if people are enthusiastic, asking questions and openly engaging, we're actually more willing to give up our time to stop and teach you. And, you know, you're the students that will then hand the suture material to and help get to suture with us, or the students who we will, you know, when something cool comes into ED, will ring because we know that you're interested and that you want to see that stuff. And so you can come to a rural placement and you can come for the day and you can sit in the room and you can go home and you can study all night or watch Netflix and chill, whatever it is that floats your boat. But the students who come out who really get engaged in what's happening and really ask questions and probe us, we're going to give you so much more back. And it's one of the things that motivates us to teach, is when a student comes out who's really eager to be rural and then is really eager to learn. And they're often the students then who give us better feedback at the end and say that they got a lot out of it. Similar to David and Justin as well, I think one of the big things, I am a rural person, so coming back rural for me was a natural progression. But you know, this is a great opportunity for you to actually experience life in a rural area. So it's not just about experiencing medicine. Doing medicine is actually probably only about 40% of what I do. The rest of it is the fact that I live in Longreach and that I live and breathe being here now, you know, raising my family here. And so being involved in the community and finding out about things that are going on and taking those opportunities to go out and do stuff is really important, because it really helps you to establish what the benefits are of living and working in a rural area beyond just the clinical side of things. Yeah, I'd like it to be fair, we're all saying the same thing because we all practice the same way.
Yeah.
And we as doctors try and get you involved too. So David already hinted at the bike ride. So in Longreach, very few medical students get through Longreach without going on a bike ride with David. And when we know what interests certain people, we make sure that we line up opportunities. So for example, I'm in the town band. So anyone who plays a musical instrument, even if they've blown a trumpet once, they get a spot in the town band while they're here. And we find ways like that to sort of tweak everybody's interests and show them what the town has.
Can we hear from the students? Some questions? The quiet ones.
Well, quiet's never how I'm usually described, but I'll jump in here. So I'm a third year Griffith student doing placement at Gympie, and I made a special request to actually do fourth year at Gympie as well. So I do have to go to Sunshine Coast Uni Hospital just to do ortho ICU. I haven't chosen my elective placement for fourth year yet, and I'd like to go somewhere that has got something to do with the Royal Flying Doctor Service, because if I'm lucky enough to get onto the Rural Generalist pathway, which is what I want to do, I want to be able to do emergency and maybe remote medicine as ASTs. My plan is to go back to my little country town eventually, or stay in somewhere like Emerald, or I like Central Queensland, so that's where I intend to go. But my hometown down in Victoria hasn't had a doctor since 2018, which was the catalyst for me sitting the GAMSAT and having a total career change. So how do I go about getting to somewhere like Emerald, or finding out who's got a Royal Flying Doctor Service potential for experience as part of a year 4 placement would be my question.
Do you want me?
Marie, yes, please, Marie. Yes.
All right. Okay. So my advice. So there, you can ask a university to assist you. I don't know how much, whether they actually organise that or not. There are a number of places where there are RFDS sites. Usually the RFDS placements are very hard to get, so they're kind of a bit like hen's teeth, really. You've got to be really lucky to get one, and they're organised through Brisbane. However, if you go to somewhere, there is always the option of asking if you can get involved. I know in Mount Isa, for example, sometimes that we can get you in with the, for a week with the Royal Flying Doctors. I have had Griffith, I've had a couple of Griffith students come up to do 2 weeks of RFDS placement this year. One of whom unfortunately got COVID the day after he got here, and so he didn't get to do anything, but yeah, so that's an option. The other thing too is that with your remote placements, like I'm not quite sure about down south further, but say in Burketown or Normanton, places like that, they often have retrievals. So you get to learn, you might not necessarily be in the plane doing the medicine, you know, with the retrieval medicine with those guys, but you get to learn what to do if you've got to get a patient ready to go and the paperwork that needs to be filled out. And it is quite a huge process to actually get all of that done. And so you can get that experience.
I've been lucky enough to do 2 retrievals in my pediatrics rotation at Gympie. So
excellent.
It was an awesome experience. And I mean, I'm born and bred rural, MMM 5 for most of my life. Moved to Melbourne for 7 years whilst my daughter was going through secondary school, and then moved back rural again to, I think we're still MMM 5. So we've got a population of about 800 people, 40 minutes to the next largest regional centre. So, yeah, being able to do the remote and rural medicine is important to me. But if I can't get in with RFDS, that's fine. And growing up on a farm and everything, I actually want to see some of the other like Queensland farming, because Victorian farming just doesn't. The property next door to ours was 3,500 hectares, and that was big for Victorian standards, but that's like a hobby farm for Queensland. So I'm looking forward to going west and going central west if I can. Maybe not too far west, because I do like the water and the beach, but yeah, I heard someone say before that they're at Emerald, so
yeah, I'm in Emerald, and I applied for an RFDS placement and I didn't get it, and that was the end of the step, because regardless of where you are on a rural placement, like the retrieval stuff happened, and it could be simply writing your name with the nurse's desk, being like, call at any time, you know, and then say they'll call you at 2 o'clock, be like, hey, you know, the doctor's not here yet, if you want to come take a history, that transfer when the RFDS comes, and then seeing them stabilize the patient is pretty much, I haven't done an RFDS like Jess probably can tell you, but they stabilize the patient in front of you, and then they load them up on a plane. You don't want to just go and come back. You've kind of seen all that medicine that's involved there.
Yeah, I was lucky enough because the student accommodation at Gympie is literally across the paddock from the hospital, both women's health and pediatrics. For 3rd year, I put my number on the whiteboard, and so there was a Cat 1 emergency Caesar at like 11 o'clock at night that I got to scrub in for, because, well, we don't have interns at Gympie, and we're lucky if we've got registers most of the time over the last 12 months. So yeah, so that was good. And also got to do like IPAP and CPAP on a couple of newborns, being called in at like 2-3 o'clock in the morning, so to go assist in pediatrics. So rural's awesome. Like, yeah.
I guess I'm because the other students haven't asked a question, I might like to ask a question to the supervisors if we've got time. Again, talking about
just to let everybody know, we're actually due back, but you ask your question.
It's just about, you know, we're talking about being, you know, how amazing rural is, but we also have experienced challenges. So how do you guys experience, what are some challenges you guys experience as rural doctors, and what are ways to cope with that?
I'll go first. Oh gosh, okay. So probably the biggest things in terms of challenges is, as a rural doctor, sometimes you're it. I'm very fortunate, and I work in a town where we have often about 10 doctors floating around at a time, but often at 2 o'clock in the morning, you may have worked all day and it ends up being you when the sick person comes in. And so that can sometimes obviously be exhausting. And I will admit, sometimes it does feel like you do some of these things at a little bit of expense to your family. So for example, you've intermittently seen my 12-month-old pop up and down into the picture because Daddy's very bad when it's Daddy's turn to watch her. But, you know, there's been nights where I saw her at 8 o'clock in the morning when I dropped her at daycare, and I didn't actually see her until 8 o'clock the next morning because I was working so much that I actually didn't get home during any awake times with her. But the flip side is that then you get to come home and talk about the patient that you saved, or the palliative care patient that you admitted and made comfortable, or the patient who I managed in the GP practice who presented to hospital, who I got to have that continuation of care. So it's always that sort of double-edged sword where there's definitely some expenses emotionally in terms of doing what we do, but then there's such great reward. And I think that's what makes people stay, is if the expense is too much and the reward's not there, then people are going to leave. And so it's about getting that balance. And, you know, to be fair, I only work 2 days a week for the health service at the moment so that I can have that balance and know that I might have a really busy day, but know I've got the next day where I can be a mum.
I think the challenges is, you know, from my perspective, is about knowing where your limits are. You know, like, you know, when you get to the point of being too tired or too old, or, you know, when it's, but the reality is that you have to accept that no matter what's in front of you, there's always going to be somebody who can do it better. You know, there's always going to be, like, if you have a motor vehicle accident, you know, 100k out of Longreach at 2 o'clock on a Sunday morning, you're not going to do as well as if you have a motor vehicle accident at 10 o'clock on a Monday morning at the corner of Bowen Bridge Road and Hurston Road, which is where Royal Brisbane Emergency Department is. So the reality is that you're there and you have to do the best with what you've got. That's actually your lot in life, which you've chosen, but it's also the patient's lot in life, which they've chosen by living out in a remote rural area. And what you can do is work on developing your skills to the best that you can, comparing your practice with as many people as possible, and continuing to learn all the time. And so I have a sort of a saying that, you know, when the big light comes to shine and says, you know, did you do well enough? You need to actually stand up and be accountable. You know, not hide under a rock and say, well, you know, somebody else could have done it better. And I think intellectual honesty is probably the best antidote to rural burnout. So I think one of the things that I say to students when they first come out is you need to work on yourself as a person your entire life. There's the good people have something to give. You know, people who are, you know, rested, refreshed, you know, have family that they see and look after, have something to give. So working on your strengths and building something that you feel is worthwhile giving, I think would be my advice.
Thanks, everybody. If everybody can just, I think it's leave room at the bottom, and then we'll go back to the main room. Thank you.
Hi guys, my name's Bronte and I'm a UQ Master of Dietetics student. So recently I undertook a placement in Mount Isa for my community and public health nutrition placement, and I spent my time there with the Centre for Rural and Remote Health, and I worked with the Murrubai Nugathati Murray Women's Group there to develop a culturally relevant and appropriate nutrition program with the women there, to understand the best methods of nutrition intervention delivery. In our kind of day-to-day experience, we also worked with a lot of allied health professionals, so that was also an amazing aspect of it as well. One of the best parts about going to Mount Isa for me was all the things that you can see and all the people that you meet. So because you're living with a group of other students, you instantly kind of break down those barriers and become really good friends with everyone. It was one of the most amazing times of my life. It was an experience that I will never forget. It has helped me grow as a person and it's helped me grow as a professional. And I am forever grateful that I had the opportunity to go. I would love to say thank you for receiving the Going Rural bursary to allow me to go to Mount Isa and participate in this placement. And I encourage everyone else to consider going rural for one of your placements. Thanks to everyone for watching this video and I hope you enjoy.
Thanks, Bronte. That was fantastic. Every time I watch that, it makes me want to go on placement. I think an important kind of starting point here is to talk about interprofessional collaborative practice. And Kirsten, I want to bring you in here if I could, because I know that Health Workforce Queensland and Southern Queensland Rural Health share a commitment to this. And could you just take the students through what we mean by that and why it's so important in a rural setting?
Yeah, thanks, Meredith. So hi, everyone. My name is Kirsten. I'm a clinical educator with Southern Queensland Rural Health. I'm based out in Charleville, so nice and remote. And my position with Southern Queensland Rural Health is an allied health clinical educator. I'm a dietitian by trade, so really found your presentation and video really interesting, Bronte, because it's a big passion area of mine, working in rural and remote communities. So as Meredith said, at Southern Queensland Rural Health, we have a very big passion for interprofessional practice, and sometimes we've got it kind of on a loop as well. So for those of you who don't know what interprofessional practice is, so interprofessional practice is when we learn with and from and about each other. So really coming together as a team and learning each other's roles and really kind of bringing that whole picture together. So we're not working in silos, we're coming together, and is a very important part of that interprofessional collaboration in that team is the patient, their family and their carers. So previously we might have missed a very important part of the care team, which is the patient and their families and their communities that surround them. And interprofessional practice really brings them to the forefront. And there's a few competencies that we look at when we're talking about interprofessional practice, and a few things is a collaborative leadership, conflict resolution, role clarification and team functioning, which is all kind of interpinned with really strong communication across the board. So it takes us away from working in our silos. So I don't work in just my dietitian silo. I'm working with all the other professions to come up with a common goal for the patient that the patient is taking ownership of, and it's something that they really want to be involved with. Where if we look at, like, I suppose, multidisciplinary teams, which has been kind of the buzzword for probably the previous 10 years or more, we're still kind of working fairly siloed and not really involving the patient so much in that care. So there's kind of being a big switch. And I could probably rattle on about this stuff all day. I did a 6-hour workshop with some students today, so it's very much on my forefront. It's something we're very passionate with and can see it starting to infiltrate, especially through our university courses. Most courses are doing something on interprofessional education, and then it's starting to seep into our healthcare teams in hospitals and community health centres too, which is really exciting to see.
Thanks, Kirsten. Andrew, I'd like to turn to you next. You're a 4th-year OT student with the University of the Sunshine Coast, and you did a 10-week placement in Kingaroy in a private practice. I think there were quite a few things throughout that practice that opportunities that came your way. Do you want to share what they were with the students?
Yeah, definitely. I think I wasn't as far out as a lot of other people were. I think, I was only about maybe 3.5, 4 hours away from the Sunshine Coast from where I'm at. So it was good. We got to go back home on the weekends sometimes and stuff, which was nice. But as far as the placement experience went, every occupational therapy student that I've met, I've highly recommended that they try and go for one of those rural generalist placements. It's just incredible, especially as a student, to just see that full breadth of OT, where 1 hour you're in a hand therapy session, and then the next hour it's mental health, and then the next hour, you're playing games and using that therapeutic use of self in a pediatric section. I think it really, for me, showed me the really broad scope of OT and really helped inform for me what areas of OT I really am interested in pursuing into the future. And I think definitely being a generalist OT is one of them. It really feels like, it keeps you on your toes and it keeps everything exciting when you're doing a little bit of everything.
Yes, I think that's one of the you know, universally what we hear from students about their rural placements is the scope of practice. The opportunities that come their way are just outstanding, and the capacity for communities, well, for your health professionals to support you in that and your learning is amazing as well. Shamama, you're a fourth year speech pathology student. You study at UQ.
Yeah.
And you did an 8-week placement last year with Bush Kids in Emerald. And I know that you had a lot of hopes before you went out on placement. And there were also some uncertainties. Can you describe for us, you know, what those uncertainties were and whether they lived up to your expectations when you went on placement?
So, if it isn't obvious, I'm a short, young, visibly Muslim woman. So I obviously had quite a few uncertainties about things like my safety, things like how would I fit in, how would my clinical educator be, how would my workplace be, and if it's going to be supportive towards me and who I am as a person. I found that in general, a lot of the people were very welcoming and very supportive and very nice. And if they ever felt like they didn't really know anything about me or my identity or about me being Muslim, they were very supportive in that they would always ask me questions like, okay, well, what is this about? What is this about? I remember the first day that I went there, I had a really long conversation with I think the receptionist. We just went off to lunch and just had a really nice conversation about, you know, about our lives, how different it might be, but really I really just saw that they were making the effort to be very welcoming towards me. Besides that, I did have a few comments here and there from maybe, for example, someone randomly in the community, or maybe one of the parents of my clients. But on the whole, I felt very supported, and I found that within the community that I was in Emerald, there was quite a lot of diversity. So you'd have quite a lot of people who are from all different backgrounds and Asian backgrounds. So someone who's more South Asian like me, or someone from Southeast Asia or East Asia. So it never really felt like I was just there on my own, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
Mm.
And do you think that, you know, at the end of the placement, do you think it made you feel stronger as a person that you rose to those challenges?
Yeah, I mean, to be honest, the problems that I had were more about finding a place to stay, figure out how I'm going to get there in the first place, and groceries. And didn't really felt much like my identity really factored into that. And I could really just focus on the important part and actually providing therapy.
Yeah. Yeah, and that was also, I remember you wanted to have some experience with Indigenous health, which was part of what happened on your placement, which was, you know, important to you. Look, so I wanted to come to you next because you've obviously had placements as a student, but you now work in St George with Vital Health. Do you want to just give a little bit of an overview of what your work circumstances are now, and then we'll talk about, you know, and do you supervise students?
Yeah, supervise. Yeah, sorry, just to continue on. from you, Meredith. Yeah, so work in Brisbane and work in St George. So do a bit in both locations for 2 different companies, and yeah, supervise students in both locations. Yeah, so a couple of days a fortnight out here, and then the back end of the weeks back in Brisbane. So yeah, been doing this for a little while now, and yeah, it's definitely changed the way I practice as an EP. Yeah.
So as an exercise physiologist.
Yeah.
So you had placements as a student. What do you recall from those placements? I think you had, was it Rockhampton and
Charleville was the other one.
Yep, that's right. Sorry. How did those placements incentivize you to go rural?
Yeah, massively. Like I'd say, probably reflecting on them now, if you look back at the opportunities I got, especially with the supervisors. So even in Brisbane now as a sort of supervisor and working now, I don't really have time. I have a little bit of time and stuff. So, and obviously give that to students where necessary. But when I'm here in St George, I've just got so much more time to give back to a student, and so you get so much more opportunity, to pick their brains and stuff like that. And that was the same when I was a student in both Rocky and Charleville. Yeah, you got to talk to the practice supervisors a hell of a lot more than in Brisbane, and yeah, you learn heaps off them. And then yeah, just following on from that sort of the multidisciplinary practice stuff. So a lot of the time you'll find placement sites in Brisbane, they're fairly narrow scope, like they might have 1 or 2 disciplines working for them. But in a lot of the rural settings, they're across the board. And I found it again as a student, you just got to find out what each discipline did, how they worked, and then that helped me a lot when I finished work. And so when I had someone in front of me and they'd just seen the OT, I had a pretty good idea of what the OT was working on and working towards and how they went about their business. And it really just opened up things a lot for me.
I know that we've got, there's a question, Lox, were you fly in, fly out of St George, or were you there servicing other areas?
So yeah, fly in, fly out at the moment. And then I'll do one day, I'll head north to Surat, which is about an hour away. As a student. So as a student, I wasn't really in St George so much. But if you were a student in St George, depending on who you were with, you probably would do a bit of outreach. So towns like, I'm assuming that's Dirranbandi, which is about an hour away. And you'd probably go to other small towns around. So outreach is usually, whether that's, whether at your hospital or private practice, you might do 1 or 2 days of outreach, or trips to properties and stuff like that for people that can't get into town. Yeah, so usually most towns like Charleville's the same, Roma's the same. You've always got little towns that surround the main hub, and they need to be serviced, I guess, just as much as the town you're centred in.
And I think part of the flexibility of rural placements is that, you have a say in, talking to your supervisor about those kind of opportunities outside of, the sort of primary placement venue location, because there are so many opportunities that come your way to, experience different types of practice, as you say, Lox. I know we've got quite a few first year students in the room, so I'm just going to open the floor to you guys, asking any questions you might have of the speakers here. No, you're going to stay quiet. Okay, that's fine. Joe, let's talk a little bit about your placement and how that, you know, what that involved and where that led you in terms of getting a job, because I think that's an important part of rural placements is the is that it often does lead into employment. Do you want to just give it that story, your story of that to the students, please?
Yes, yeah, absolutely. So I wanted to do my placement in Yarrabah as a social work student. We had 500 hours to complete, bearing in mind that there was Aboriginal communities have a number of extra public holidays. Also that we're in the, we have a wet season up here. So the roads, because it's over a range, the roads often get blocked and you can't get in. So it was extended to about 4 months. I was going in and out of Yarrabah. For me, there's nowhere to stay in Yarrabah, no accommodation because it's an Aboriginal community. So the closest place to stay would be heading out into the Cairns region. So that drive out was a challenge, was one of my challenges. It's about an hour drive each way over ranges and whatnot. So it does get quite tricky. So doing the placement out there, getting in and out, it was a long placement, but it was an amazing placement, obviously because I've stayed. And once you get in there and you get to see some of the needs and as well as some of the absolute beauty of the region and the people, it just really connected with me. And if I hadn't had that placement experience, I wouldn't know. Actually, I probably not even sure if I'd be working in Aboriginal health at all. So the placement really opened my eyes to the experience and what connected me to that particular area of work. And now I just love it. And it's where I'm going to stay for quite some time. So I believe that working into some of the Indigenous communities, it is hard to retain staff, usually because they're very difficult to get to. And there's it's a bit of a drive for most of them if you're staying in the town outside of the Aboriginal, outside the community. So it is hard to retain staff. So if you go in and you're happy and you find it's a match for you, doing a placement there will introduce you to that. Also build your skills, because absolutely everywhere you come across people with Indigenous backgrounds all across Australia. And whilst communities are different, you will learn some skills that will carry across all your practices. So it is quite a valuable experience, even if you don't go into working in that field wholly. So yeah, my experience was great. I was not jotting down some notes as well. There was one thing I can do as a tip for anyone going into communities, particularly Aboriginal communities, every day go down to the local coffee shop and get your coffee, because that's where I met most of my people. And they weren't just, oh, who's this white person in our community? They got to see me every day and then know my name and knew that what coffees I liked and had a good yarn in that sort of social setting. And it really open things up for me in terms of being accepted in community. It's a silly thing to think about, but it actually is a good way to connect. I mean, I imagine it's in any community, but yes, in these little communities, it's really my top tip. So,
Joe, I think I can concur with that point. We were joking. One of our Toowoomba colleagues was out today, and we said it might only take 4 minutes to get to work of a morning, and I live on the complete opposite end of Charleville to our office, but it takes you a good 15 minutes at the coffee shop, so you still need to counteract that into, because that's where you meet everybody. Similar to my experience working in bigger hospitals, that's where you found everyone was at the coffee cart or the coffee van at the hospital. It's the same wherever you go, so it's a great place to meet people, and they will get to know you pretty quickly. And I think something just on that note, don't be kind of a little bit put off if someone kind of knows that you're coming, like, oh, you're the new OT student, or oh, you're the new speech student, we heard someone was coming, because that's how they often they recognize students are coming, and they get to know them, and they really value the input that students play in the community. So they do know, and they're like, oh, so you're the new such and such. I still get called the new the new Jess, and I've been in my job for over 12 months now. Jess is like just left a good 18 months ago. So that's how people might recognize you to start with. But yeah, definitely the coffee shop is the place to be.
You're right, Kirsten. I mean, you are so welcomed by community. I mean, like, it's just a massive appreciation society of, you know, that, you know, and I think it just makes an enormous difference to understanding the need within a community, because I think perhaps it was you, Andrew, that you had the experience when you went to on placement, that you really got how they were short-staffed. And whilst that was a challenge, it was also an opportunity for you to step up. And so I think experiencing, you know, the appreciation for, you know, incoming or potential future workforce makes a big difference. I'm also interested to ask those of you who have experience of supervision, what are the things that you think would advantage, you know, students who have yet to go on placement or are coming up to another placement? What are you looking for as a supervisor? What kind of makes a difference?
I'm happy to kick off, Meredith, if you like. I think one thing is be prepared. I know it sounds silly, but one thing I really value as a supervisor across my career is students that come having read a little bit about the community, have a bit of understanding of the health needs maybe of the community or what the service offers. So not just rocking up on your first day kind of going, oh, so what's a caseload maybe, like what type of patients do we get, like having a bit of a look if it's a private practice, having a bit of a look at the website, seeing what they offer. For a health service, just having a bit of a look at what type of professions do they have there, how big is the hospital in terms of the bed numbers, and a big thing is just how far away is it from the metro sites. So out here in Charleville, we're a good 10.5-hour drive from Brisbane, 7.5-hour drive from Toowoomba. Sometimes students don't understand the breadth of that distance, and just knowing that it's a smaller service out here, and the need for patients to be transferred back to those larger sites as well. I think another thing is contact your supervisor early, kind of as soon as you know where you're going on placement, get in contact, flick them an email, introduce yourself. Say, hi, I'm Kirsten, I'm coming out placement in a couple of months or weeks. Really excited to get out there. Is there any resources that I should read beforehand? What type of patients might I come across? Just so you've kind of got that upper hand of what you're coming out to see, and then you can feel a little bit more prepared in your own thing. I think a big thing in terms of self-care and looking after yourself, have a look what social activities are on. We often send our students emails. Hi guys, the races are on in Roma next weekend. Everyone head up for a road trip. Just so you've got some things planned, especially I know Andrew was saying it was a bit closer to Brizzy, so he could duck home back to the Sunshine Coast. He could duck home on weekends, but somewhere like out of Charleville, you're not getting home and back in a weekend. So having a look at what's around. Even though they're small communities, they often have a lot of things on. So check for your sporting clubs. If you're a basketball player or a netballer, a footy player, have a look, have a Google, have a search on the Facebook page or the local community directory, buy, swap, sell type pages. They're a really good source of knowledge. And if you even just post on one of those, hey guys, I'm coming out for a placement. I'll be out in Charleville for 8 weeks. Is there any netball or touch footy on? A big thing is in most Queensland rural communities, rugby league is life. If you're over here over summer, learn how Brisbane Broncos are going on the ladder, especially if you're in the lower half. I assume it's the Cowboys if you're up in northern Queensland, because it is the perfect conversation starter with anyone. Football or the weather, you'll fit right in. So yeah, that's probably the biggest thing. I think contact your supervisor early, contact your university department of rural health. So down in Southern Queensland, that's us here at Southern Queensland Rural Health, and then we've got the Centre for Rural and Remote Health that Marie discussed earlier for the higher part of the state as well. But yeah, just embrace it, I think, is the biggest thing. Just be ready for a challenge. Challenge yourself.
Fox, do you want to add to that?
Yeah, just 2 points from me. Kirsten's pretty much covered all.
Sorry.
No. Well, glad you did. Yeah, so like maybe once you get there, if you're still searching for something like whether it's a social sport or an activity, a lot of the time if you talk to people, even your own patients, just in general conversation, they'll be very likely to try and link you up with people in the community. Often you'll find that people are very helpful and want to help you in a lot of ways. So those conversations with people once you get there, I think, are really beneficial. And then depending on the location and obviously resources, and if you've got time, visiting that location before you go there would eliminate, I feel, a lot of barriers. And it's just embracing the town and spending a night there. And look, that's not achievable for everyone, I understand. But if you are really concerned about that location that you're going to, that's what I would suggest to any future students who are going to go on a rural placement.
And I think the community knows that rural healthcare is in dire straits of more clinicians, so we need more. So they welcome students with open arms. Anything they can do to convince a student that living out west, up north, away from the coast is the way of life, they will do it. So if it is letting you know when volleyball is on, anything, where to get the best coffee, there's always like a sneaky where to buy cheap fruit and veg or something like that around. They will let you know because they want you to stay.
There's quite a lot of discussion in the chat about navigating family and placements. I think it would be great if we spend a few minutes talking about that. Obviously, it's a struggle for those of you who are studying and who've got family and partners, and how you navigate that. Nathan, I'm going to put you on the spot, but I know that this is a massive issue for many students. But I think you're a good person to speak to that.
Yeah.
Yeah, you are.
What would you like me to?
I think just to describe, let's just talk about what are the difficulties here. It's not, I guess we make the assumption students going on placement are single, they've got no ties.
Yeah.
It's all good, but it's not. That's not how it is.
Yeah. So I guess my situation is that I'm a mature age student. I've been to uni before with another degree, worked in that career, and I've now come back to health as a OT student. So I have a wife. I've got 3 kids. 2 of those have got special needs, which makes rural living a little bit difficult, which we have done for many years. We've lived rurally, but we're now on the Sunshine Coast. And in terms of placement, our placements are 10-week placements. And so what our thought is, we would like to go rural for that placement, or I would like to go rural for the placements. So our hope is that we're able to take the kids out of school, move them into a local school, wherever that may be, so that, we can basically move there as a family for that 10-week placement, rather than me being out west somewhere, or up north, wherever it may be, and the family being here on the Sunshine Coast. So, and with that, my wife, she also works fly in, fly out. She's a doctor working with RFDS up in Mount Isa. So we sort of got to somehow fit that in the mix as well. So yeah, there's a lot of difficulties. Like, as I said, we've lived rurally for a lot of the last 10 years. And yeah, we we love it. We love the smaller communities. We find being on the Sunshine Coast that it's incredibly busy. You don't really get to know people all that well. So yeah, we're sort of biding our time until we can fly the coop and head off, which for us, it might be 10 years before we can actually live permanently rurally again, until the kids are through high school, just because of their complexities. But yeah, basically, as soon as we possibly can, we intend on heading bush. And I think, as Andrew was saying, in terms of the placements, working rurally, you get to work in so many different little areas and pick up so much more skill based than what you would just working in the city. When my wife was a junior doctor, we lived in Mount Isa for a period of time, and the opportunities she got out there were enormous, fantastic. So much more than she ever would have gotten in the city.
Hello everyone, I'm Wendy. I'm a Future Workforce Coordinator for Health Workforce Queensland. Once again, this is an interactive discussion, so please throw your questions out there, not in the chat. We'd love to hear from you. But yeah, I'd like to start this session by just showing you a short placement video created by one of our student speakers in the room, Kate Ostwald. Kate was lucky enough to secure a placement with the Rural Flying Doctor Service in July this year. You'll note at the end of the clip that Kate mentions Going Rural helped her financially with her placement. Going Rural is a bursary offered by Health Workforce Queensland, and Meredith will speak about this when we return to the main room later. So please enjoy just while I share this clip.
When I was offered a placement with the Royal Flying Doctor Service out of Townsville, I was already initially excited. And if I could wrap up that experience in one word, I would have to say that RFTS nursing is completely addictive. The other side of RFTS placement that I found so enjoyable was the rewarding nature of it. So you're getting in the back of a plane and you're going out to all these different parts of Queensland and giving people the same quality of care that they would receive in a tertiary hospital in a metropolitan setting. And I really believe that patients are truly grateful for the work you do, because you're ensuring that just because they live a bit further out of Queensland, that they can still receive that extremely high standard of care. And I think that is one of the biggest privileges that you can have as a nurse, is to be able to give people that same level of care no matter where they call home. For my 2 weeks with RFTS, I genuinely felt like I was living in a movie. I've learned so much clinically, and I've met some of the most amazing people all over Queensland. And I'd like to say a big thank you to UQ for offering me this once-in-a-lifetime opportunity. But also to Going Rural, a big motivator to do rural placements for this exact reason. And the financial support they've given me took a lot of stress away from me during those 2 weeks and really allowed me to fully embed myself in that placement.
All right. Yeah, it certainly looks like quite an experience there, Kate. I'm sure we'll hear more about it later when we speak to you. I hope she's made it into the room. Yes,
yeah, I made it in.
See you there. That's great. And you'll be able to answer any questions that come your way. Firstly, though, I believe Sherilyn's already introduced herself. So we just might throw to you, Sherilyn, ask you to talk a little bit about what you do and how students best navigate the administration side of rural placements.
Sure.
Universities do.
Yep. So basically, just to go through the points, as I introduced myself before and what I do, my biggest role is to advocate for students for rural placements. One of the hurdles that we do face on a day-to-day basis is
universities not having that understanding that students don't want to leave the community. They don't want to leave their hometown. They don't want to leave maybe their surrounding shire. Happy to sort of travel to a neighbouring town, but for any reason, whether that be cultural issues or whether that be they might have a pet or husband or small children, they don't want to leave their hometown for long extended periods of time. So one of my roles is to advocate for rural placements for local students especially, and to also give people an opportunity that aren't from rural areas, that opportunity to experience what rural life actually is and how great it actually is. As you would have seen via some of the chat that's been going on in the main room, we sometimes hear stories when we're at university about, oh, you don't want to go rural because, you know, you're not going to be accepted there, or it's too small of a town and there's nothing to do. You know what? I've lived in Roma pretty much all my life and there's heaps to do. Your problem is you've actually got to go out and look for things to do. Get yourself out into the community, drop down to the local PCYC or something like that, join the local gym, have a look, find an interest that you want, jump on Facebook and have a look around to see what sort of networking there is. That's where SQRH comes into it as well. Reach out to our clinical educators, our student support coordinators, and we'll link you in with those community things that you can do while you're on placement. So first of all, though, navigating the administration of a rural placement, what does the university do? Basically, the university is trying to find you a placement wherever they can. And that's not a bad thing, but they're not necessarily going to have on their radar that you want to go to Roma or that you really want to go to Mount Isa. Their priority is to get you a placement wherever there's availability. Our roles, Marie's role, for example, is to try and be that little key connection where we can actually go, hang on a minute, I know that student, they're a local student to the southwest or the northwest area. I do know that part of the graduate pathway, for example, for nurses, I know for Southwest Hospital and Health Service, if you haven't done a clinical placement within the Southwest Hospital and Health Service facility, doesn't matter what one, but if you haven't done one, you more than likely will not be considered for a graduate year, unless you've done a rural placement anyway. But if you've done a rural placement in Southwest, you're going to be given a higher priority. Plus, they've tried you before they buy you, basically. So they know that you're good. I've seen so many nurses over the past 4 years, for example, and allied health clinicians that have come in and they've experienced it, said the day they got here, they said, oh no, we don't want to go rural. We don't really want to go rural. They've come back here for their grad year because they loved it. And that's what we want to hear. So the point is, if you ever have any trouble finding a placement that you really, if you've got a passion to go somewhere, keep on to your university about that. Reach out to your local UDRH, whoever that may be. So if you jump online, if you search University of Department of Rural Health, it'll show you every single University Department of Rural Health in Australia. We all talk. I'm the chair of the Student Placement Coordinator Network for Australia, for Australian Rural Health Education Network. So I link in with every single one of the UDRHs, thus being how I know Marie as well. So we all talk. We know that if I've got a student that really wants to go to Longreach or Mount Isa, I reach out to Marie and I let her know who the student is. She reaches out to the university and links in with them. We all talk. That is the purpose of the UDRH. Accommodation options. Each of the UDRHs has their own accommodation. We offer subsidised accommodation. Some of it is free for our main partners. So, for example, with Southern Queensland Rural Health, our partners are University of Queensland and University of Southern Queensland, sorry. Too many to remember all the acronyms. And they are, so if we've got a domestic student from allied health, nursing, midwifery coming from either one of those partnered universities, they are given free accommodation as a domestic student. Then you've got a university like Griffith. They aren't one of our partners, but they are a part of our collaboration. So we offer a reduced price for students coming from Griffith University. They're kind of like the second cousin that we just look after a little bit. And then all other universities pay, students pay a fee for the accommodation. And we also offer bursaries, which it's actually, we did offer bursaries for extended placements. So if you're undertaking a placement for any longer than 8 weeks,
Now that will change for next year. So it will be that it will be open for all students, no matter what education provider they are coming from. So it's not just going to be for UQ and UniSQ. They will be eligible for anyone doing an extended placement within Southwest Queensland. Barriers, not any barriers that you might come across. Number one that I can think of is accommodation. It is far and few between. The best thing I can tell you to do as soon as you have been given that confirmed placement from your education provider, jump onto your local UDRH. And if there is no UDRH accommodation available, reach out to the provider that you're going to, so the facility you're going to, and find out from them as soon as you can where the best places are to stay. They are local, they know. Sometimes the accommodation, for example, with Southwest Hospital and Health Service, some accommodation is organised as part of your placement, but don't think that if you haven't heard anything about the accommodation that you're going to automatically have accommodation, because I've had students turn up in Roma before and they've called me on a Sunday afternoon and said, where am I staying? And I don't really oversee accommodation because our student support coordinators do that. And my response was, because I happened to be on call, was, did you apply for accommodation? Their answer was no. So they have turned up for an 8-week placement and have not organised accommodation. So we had to rush around and find emergency accommodation. And luckily the Hospital and Health Service was able to help us out for a couple of nights until we could find something more permanent. But generally speaking, health services don't have accommodation really readily available. They are struggling to get staff, let alone housing students. So it is really important to make that contact. You're coming on placement to be work ready. You need to be, I guess the only word I can say is adults. You have to step up to the plate. You have to ask those questions. And without asking those questions, you're not going to know. We're not going to serve you all the answers on a silver platter. It is really important that you are stepping up and asking the questions you need to do. If you know you've got a 21st birthday party that you've got to attend and it's partway through your placement, have that conversation with the director of nursing and say, hey, do you mind if these dates, could I be rostered off because I'd like to go home for that weekend because it's my sister's 21st birthday? Most of the rural Johns would turn around and go, sure, that's not a problem. Thanks for letting me know in advance. They'll do your roster accordingly.
As long as it's greater than 24 hours, we will be very flexible. But don't expect on the day to change things.
No, that's exactly right. So the preparation, I guess, is what I'm getting to, is the key. So it's really important with that. I think that's sort of up to me. Oh, private practice placements, sorry. Southwest private practice placements, most of the private practices, they actually aren't private practices. They are owned by Southwest Hospital and Health Service. So our Charleville Health Clinic, for example, is owned by Southwest Hospital and Health Service. There are a couple of private practices around Southwest Queensland. We do facilitate placements there, but once again, that's something that's done on a case-by-case basis, and you'd need to speak to your university. Generally, the universities will either reach out directly to the private practice or they'll reach out to me, depending on what the relationship is there and if they've had placements there before. But generally speaking, across Southwest Queensland, the private practices don't take nursing placements. Only the Hospital and Health Service owned private practices take nursing students. So any questions?
No, I have one. Do students do a placement induction at all when they
So with Queensland, so there's two different types. So private practices are responsible for their own inductions of students. With Queensland Health has a deed that students may have heard of, and before they start placement, they're required to complete a number of documents. They also have to complete these documents not only for their education provider, but also for the health service they're attending. So they need to complete things like a student deed poll, which that outlines what is expected of them and how they need to be prepared for their placement. So they are the legalities forms basically in a nutshell. And then the second form they need to complete is one that is called a student orientation checklist. So it goes through things like a national police check, it goes through blue card, NDIS workers check, all those sorts of things that are mandatory for you to attend a placement at a hospital and health service. And that's across all disciplines. No matter what discipline you are required to complete both those to attend a Queensland Health facility. There's also things in there that outline, obviously, now with COVID, that your vaccinations are included and you must have your 2 mandatory vaccinations. And we recommend that you have the 3rd vaccination as well. And Southwest Hospital and Health Service do have an additional form, which is called the Southwest Pre-Placement Check, that we require to be completed, and that includes your mask fit test evidence is the main key, and your influenza vaccination, because a lot of our facilities within Southwest Hospital and Health Service are called a multi-purpose health service and have an aged care component attached to it. And under the Queensland health guidelines, aged care facilities, you must have an influenza vaccination to attend a clinical placement at that facility.
Okay. Thanks so much for that, Sherilyn. Sounds like preparation is and being organised is key to any placement that you take on. Yeah, sounds that way. Okay, so I might move on to maybe Sandy now. We haven't heard from Sandy. If you'd like to introduce yourself and then maybe give the students a bit of an idea on what a day in the life might be like for students on placement. And Christy, you're also welcome to answer this question as well.
Hello everyone, my name's Sandra. I'm the Director of Nursing here at Burketown Health Clinic and also a nurse practitioner. So Burketown is a remote Indigenous community in the Goldfield Carpent area, and our primary health centre, we operate from Monday to Friday, 8 to 4:30, but we're also on call after hours. So we operate an ambulance service based at the centre. There's 2 nurses when we're fully staffed, but a lot of the time we're here on our own, so it'll be a single nurse here. Yeah, like I said, we operate the ambulance service and an emergency service after hours, so it could be that we work 8 till 4:30, or it could be that we work 20 hours a day and come back and back that up the next day. As far as patient presentations, I suppose it's anything from A to Z. So we've got a wide area that we cover, which is up to 3 hours away, or about 300 kilometres. And we can get some road traumas. We can get anything from station injuries. There's a lot of cattle stations around the area. And then your everyday presentations that turn up in an emergency department. We also do chronic disease management. So a big part of it is chronic disease management with our community. And we dispense here. We're not a pharmacy, but we have a little pharmacy that we dispense from here. We have a really great traditional owner, Indigenous health worker, who loves having students out here, and he typically will take students to look at crocodiles and snakes and goannas and all that kind of interesting stuff. So yeah, we have had some students open up boxes in the clinic that may have pythons inside them. After working long days, wasn't welcomed very well, but no, it's a great little clinic and a good community, and I encourage anyone to come out and have a look at these places, and I can guarantee that you will enjoy yourself.
Christy, how about a day in the life in your area?
Sure, no worries. So I kind of base mine off Charleville Hospital. So just a little bit of a background. It's got 14 beds on its general ward. It has 1 birth suite, 1 theatre, and from memory, 5 beds down an ED. So that's kind of the size that you've got. So when working as a nurse on the general ward, if you're in charge, you'll attend an interprofessional scrum in the morning. So all the doctors, nurses and allied health get together. They discuss inpatients, outpatient presentations overnight, as well as any expecs or inter-hospital transfers that come in. They then go around to the general ward, and again, you'll have a doctor, an intern, the pharmacist and the senior nurse in charge to go around and see all the inpatients. We have telehealth patients also present to the hospital, so you might run into them and just point them in the right direction and say hi as you go along the corridor. If you're working on the ward in charge, you also may have the opportunity to work down an ED, especially if they're busy. So oftentimes you might have a chest pain in, you might have a paediatric presentation at the same time that might have a fracture. you might give them some intranasal pain relief prior to x-ray and just get them sorted. And then you might have a range of patients, such as like elderly patients coming in for regular wound dressings. Quite often the clinic downtown does it, but again, we're so small. If the nurse isn't working at the GP clinic, often they'll pre-arrange for patients to come up to the hospital and be seen. Other things that you might do, you might help transfer patients from ED to the ward and help out when they're busy. Later on, the paediatric patients probably confirm that they do have a fracture, so you'll also organise for them to have some procedural sedation. You'll work alongside the doctors and make sure that there's allocated staff for that to happen safely. Other things, you might actually get a lunch break, which is lovely. You'll go down to the tea room and there you might bump into one of the community nurses and you might just have a quick chat. A big part of our role here is we complete outreach, and that can be up to 2 hours away of different sites. So you run into her and she's off to Cunnamulla the next day. She's a cardiac rehab nurse, so she's got 3 patients to review. She's got 1 new referral, which she'll actually complete a home assessment. So she'll go in, she'll have a medication review, and she'll actually assess that patient in their home. Then she might pop on a Holter monitor in the afternoon before coming back. So there's a big component of travel within many of our roles. The cardiac patient that you saw earlier in ED, you get the call that they've been admitted and that they actually need transfer to the PA for further investigation. So you pop up onto the ward because RFDS has let you know that they'll be heading off to the airport in about 30 minutes. So you help the nurses up there for photocopy all the documentation. You notify the family that we've actually got an ETA so that they can drop any last minute items that they might need for the plane and say their goodbyes. You make sure that they've got appropriate access and give them some antiemetics before they head off. And then as QAS arrive, they notify you that they'll need you to come out to the airport as well. So you might act as the nurse escort out to the airport. So you'll pop on out there, you'll hand over to the RFDS nurse, wish the patient safe travels, then pop into the ambulance again and back to the ward for handover before heading home after your shift. So I just wanted to really, we are really rural generalists. If you get to come out here, we do such a wide scope within our normal everyday of like different presentations that you might see, whether that's trauma, whether that's medical based, paediatric. It might be those chronic care presentations. It might be the uncontrolled diabetic who walks in with complications. It might be an elderly patient that's had a fall that needs to be admitted to hospital for discharge planning. So you definitely do get to see a wide range of presentations through our hospitals and clinics.
Thanks, Christy. Thanks for that. So we might move to the students now, students who've got experience of being on placement, and we might hear some of their stories about what their expectations were leading into a placement, what the challenges were, and if they would have done anything differently before they got there. So who would like to kick off? Maybe Kate, seeing we've seen your video already, Kate. And if will you just let them know what your what year level you're in, and have you done any other placements other than your RFDS?
Yeah, so I have just finished my last placement, so I'm final year nursing, so I'm completely done now, which is really exciting. But so at UQ, I know it's going to be different with every university, but they'll ask you at the end of second year if you are like willing to go rural in your third year, and you'll get an option if you want to do 1 semester rural or both semesters rural. And I actually chose just to do 1 semester rural because I live in Brisbane, so just for convenience, I thought, oh, I'll just do 1. So I did go to Toowoomba and spent time in their emergency department and orthopedics, which I don't know why that was considered rural, but somehow it was, which I thought was a bit of a scheme, but anyway. And then I got an email from the uni saying, oh, like, do you want to go rural again next semester? And I think it was probably more so a question of them just wanting to give any placement they can. But I thought, oh, I haven't really gone that rural this semester. So they offered me a 6-week placement in Dalby, which I'm lucky my parents are here, so it was very practical. And yeah, I didn't really know what to expect before coming out to Dalby for 6 weeks. It's a slightly bigger health service. I think they've got 22 beds on their ward. Their emergency might have 12 beds. There's, I think, 2 birthing suites. It's slightly bigger. But I was very shocked when I got my roster for Dolby just to see where they probably send students everywhere for your placement. So I had, I think, a third of my shifts on the ward, which is all the people the people on the ward can be a variety of different reasons. It might be people that are awaiting transfer to PA for cardiac stuff, or it could be people awaiting nursing home placement, or people that have come in with like a range of different conditions. Then I also got to spend some time up in theatre, which I think is an opportunity that you would never get as a nursing student in Brisbane, is to go up and have days in theatre. And I got to see full days of like gynae, where I saw a full hysterectomy. And then I got to see a C-section that day. And then I also had a day of scopes. So it's just that type of stuff that you just don't get to see in Brisbane all in one placement. Then you have days in renal with the dialysis or infusions. You get to go see all the chemo get done. And then you also get to spend quite a bit of time in emergency, which is really good because I think it complements the shifts that you're doing on the ward. I think you really get to see the start of the presentation and then the end. Yeah, so in that 6 weeks, I feel like I saw like literally as much as I could have. And I think they're the type of opportunities that you don't get in Brisbane. And what's really complemented by that is you're with nurses and doctors and allied health professionals and Indigenous health workers that they just want to share as much knowledge with you as they can. And there's none of that competitive nature that you might have witnessed in Brisbane with placements where everyone's trying to be argy-bargy and see the most. It's just a really supportive learning environment where it's like you can ask as many questions as you want. You're never going to look like an idiot. And yeah, if you want to actually take time to learn what you're doing and why you're doing your job, I think you should probably think about going rural.
Thanks, Kate. Does anyone have any questions for Kate? No?
Hello, I'm Zoe. I've got
Zoe.
a question about the RFDS placement you did.
Yeah.
I'm kind of keen on doing that. I'm just at James Cook, and I'm sure it's different for each university. But we sort of have to write like a submission as to like why we'd want to do it. And there's like lots of people that want to do it and they pick. And I was wondering if you have any tips for like how you got to do your placement.
Yeah, so for my university, it was like a statement about why you would want to go rural as an umbrella term. So that they group RFDS placements into rural. So I didn't have to do a statement specifically for RFDS, but they used my rural statement to support that placement opportunity. So I think when you're writing something like that, I think personal experience is always going to help. Like I've grown up, I grew up in a property in Northwest New South Wales, and then my parents have moved around central Queensland, and now we're in Dolby. So I've been really lucky to see rural health services in action. But I think at the end of the day, what's going to get you over the finish line is if you have really good intentions to actually go rural. I think you do see a lot of students that they come out and they kind of take the mickey out of rural placements and think that it's like funny and it's, I don't know if anyone else has experienced that, but I have seen it a bit where they think it's like, it's just something to put on TikTok. Anyway, I think, yeah, if you're going to write an application, you need to think about like, why would RFDS support your learning in your final year of nursing and your future career development? And yeah, why you are genuinely inclined to go and witness something like that.
Yeah, perfect. Thanks, Kate.
That's right.
Thanks, Kate. I'll go to Casey. Would you like to share your placement experience, Casey? Tell them where you went and yeah, what your experience was.
Hello, everyone. My name's Casey. I am from Inverell area, so like North New South Wales. Used to be in North Queensland. So I am on my last placement at the moment, actually, in Broken Hill, New South Wales. But I did do my last placement. I've done all my placements in Townsville at their big hospital up there. I've done my like first to third, I think they are. I'm also with CQU, sorry. And yeah, I did all my placements up there. Absolutely loved them. I did cardiac, I did planned procedure unit, which was great. Lots of cardiac monitors, lots of ECGs. Had so much fun up that way. And then me and my partner had just moved to Inverell, and I've done my previous placement to this one in Toowoomba Pediatric Ward on a private hospital, St. Vinny's. Absolutely loved it. My experience there was just great. I think because I have grown up on cattle stations, going to a bit bigger hospital like Toowoomba was just amazing. It just put all the puzzles together for me. So I had I had 4 weeks on pediatric ward, and it was kind of like based alongside the midwifery ward as well, and that's eventually probably the track that I want to go down, you know, with mid and whatnot. So the ladies and gentlemen there were just so beautiful. They really took me under their wing, and I got to see a birth, which was just amazing. I was like in my element. That was really cool. I met some beautiful people, and I think it was just the initial like you're caring for a family, like, and it could be such a big family, like, you know, you're not just caring for the child, you're caring for their whole family. It may not even be their mother, it may not be their biological mother that's caring for them. So you really had to take into consideration a lot of different cultural aspects as well, which was great to see. And I also, and so the Go Rural scholarship that I had got really helped me with my accommodation, just took that stress off, you know.
Yeah,
like I was
that's
sorry.
wonderful. We're going to talk about going rural in the next segment. So thanks for that, Casey. Yeah, we've run out of time there. Sorry, we need to get back to the main room. Anna, I didn't get to speak to you. Sorry, do you want to say something quickly about seeing you grew up in a rural area? Why everybody should give it a go?
Sure. So I'll try and be as quick as I can, but I grew up in regional Queensland. I grew up an hour out of Toowoomba, and I've got family in Morven, Roma and Quilpie. And I've had most of my family go all over central Queensland as well, with my 2 brothers currently with their wives working up in Cowanyama, which is an Aboriginal community at the top of Australia. So hearing their experiences really got me interested in going rural. And obviously being a kid who grew up out west as well, I spent all my school holidays out at Morven, Roma and Quilpie, doing castrating and branding cattle. So that's how I spent my holidays. And I used to hate coming back to Toowoomba because even Toowoomba was too city for me. But I must admit, obviously for me, it's opposite. I went from growing up out west and then moving to Brisbane, and it was a big culture shock for me. There were so many people, yet I never felt more isolated in my life because there just was a massive lack of community. So for kids who are considering going rural and are worried about being isolated, to be honest, if it were me sort of giving an answer to that, I wouldn't say that you're going to be isolated. If anything, they're going to welcome you with open arms. There's always something going on the weekends, and you don't have to bring anything. Like one of my neighbours at my parents' property, he's got a big dam and heaps of like boats and stuff. You rock up there with nothing in your hands and you're welcome with open arms. So I think if you're looking to go rural, it definitely opens up a lot of avenues for you. And I think that you should look at it as an opportunity to sort of get uncomfortable. And being uncomfortable is not a bad thing. The more uncomfortable you are, the quicker you'll learn how to work on your feet. And it'll help you sort of reduce any stresses you have around things that make you nervous in your nursing care. I've done placements only in Toowoomba. I haven't gone any further than that. Next year I'll be going rural. However, I have also worked as an assistant nurse for 6 years now between, I've worked in Roma and in Toowoomba as an assistant nurse, as well as in Brisbane. And I'll have to say the people that I looked after in Brisbane, it was quite consistent across the board, and you were kind of just doing the same things day in and day out. Whereas when I'm working in Toowoomba, and especially when I worked at Roma, you would come across cases that were just like so mind-blowing, like you'd never seen things like that before. And then I would come back to my clinical based learning classes through UQ, and I had prior learning that most other students didn't, just because being out west and being in regional and rural communities, they let you take the lead a lot more. Even as an assistant nurse, I was taking and doing things that a registered nurse would be doing because they trained me in it, and gave me certificates in it so that I could do those things. And it's majorly helped me through my nursing career as well, and leading into university as well. So if you are on the fence about doing it, I would say just take the plunge and go and get uncomfortable and actually see how you feel being in another place with people you don't know, and sort of learn to do your nursing care in a community that isn't a massive city where you're used to what your community is. I suppose trying to make it as quick as I can. It's very rough, but
Thank you so much, Anna. That's some great inspirational words to end on.